Hi, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. You know, in just a few days, we'll be starting our next round of interviews with all of those folks who will be squaring off against each other in the final election in November. Always kind of a fun thing. But before that frenzy starts, there were a couple of different topics that I really felt strongly that I would like to do some shows on, and I know that they're topics that are of very big interest to a lot of Bedford residents. All of you will remember, a little over a year ago, our longtime Bedford Police Chief, Dave Bailey, announced that he was retiring. And that came as a surprise to many Bedford residents, even though he probably would have liked to have retired several years previous. It's not a stretch to say that Dave Bailey was really considered kind of a Bedford institution, if you will, and many Bedford longtime residents kind of couldn't imagine a Bedford Police Department without him. They were just so used to seeing him there. But of course, time changes everything, and everyone obviously wished him a retirement that would be full of a lot of wonderful things for him. Well, believe it or not, in just a few days from this taping today, our new police chief, John Bryfonski, will have actually been a full year here in Bedford. A full year on the job. Time just flies so incredibly fast. And he came to us with many, many years of very impressive law enforcement experience, and very quickly settled into town and established his own presence. And I think a lot of people now kind of can't remember it before he was here, which is a good thing. So he's already made a significant mark. Thus, I thought that his one-year anniversary would be kind of a perfect time to ask him if he'd like to come into the Tell It Like It Is show and maybe tell us about the highlights of his year, about some of his goals for the future. And he graciously accepted to do so. So with no further ado from me, because I know he has lots of things he wants to tell you, I have to tell you, my guest today is a very special one, and that's Chief John Bryfonski. Chief, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I can't believe you're here a year. That flew.
Time certainly does fly, and I think, at least for me, as you get older, I think the world spins faster.
Oh, that is the truth.
You just can't slow it down. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind year.
I know. Well, you know, every new boss faces a lot of challenges coming into any new job, obviously. And particularly when you're coming into an organization that has such a high public profile, which of course the police department does, and even more so into an organization which really can have kind of a profound effect on a community, which obviously a police department does. Add into the bargain, you were going to be replacing somebody that kind of was like a local legend. How did you start out facing all of that all at once? I mean, that is like a huge challenge.
It was a steep learning curve, vertical almost, I think. But what I did initially was similar to what I did when I moved from office to office in the Drug Enforcement Administration. First, you do a little bit of background on the office, and in this case, Bedford PD and the town. So I did my homework with respect to that. But I think the most useful early and initial information that I got was from Dave Bailey. I had an opportunity to meet with Dave on several occasions after I was named to come in as the new chief. And Dave was just fantastic in helping me learn the culture of the institution and the organization of Bedford PD. And that really hastened my ability to step into his shoes, and I'll never be able to fill Dave Bailey's shoes.
Well, you have your own shoes.
Physically or otherwise. But
yeah, he has kind of big feet, doesn't he?
He was a great asset to me. Still is.
Yeah.
Dave and I meet on a regular occasion.
Actually, I saw the two of you just last night together.
That's right.
Yapping away. And I rudely went over and interrupted the both of you to say hi.
Yeah, we enjoyed it. So he's been a great asset, and that really helped me along early on, and it's still helping me along.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, the ability to transfer information from an outgoing administration to the new administration is key, whether you're talking about you know, presidential administration or Bedford PD or DEA or any other.
Well, just the historical perspective. I mean, you can't get that out of a manual or what have you.
Institutional knowledge is not printed anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And it really rests with those individuals. That's why it's so important to to have that transition, and Dave has been and continues to be just great about it.
Now, was one of the first things getting to know the staff, or did you have to do other types of planning first, or how does that all kind of shake out from somebody in a position like yours, which is very different than if you were like a corporate CEO?
You look at the organization chart, you look at the numbers, meaning the budget, you look at the forecast, you look at the community in terms of its financial stability, and then you begin to learn the roles and positions in the organization, and then the people. And I try to front load that task by not only getting to know my principal assistant and the captain, Captain Dan DeWitty. Again, like Dave Bailey, Dan's been just extraordinarily fantastic.
He's a good guy.
In helping me get assimilated into the organization. But then I set upon a task of sitting down and meeting with every single employee in Bedford PD. Some I spent 30, 40 minutes with, some I spent as much as 2 to 3 hours. And over the course of a few months, not only did I get to know the members of the police department, all a very, very talented group of women and men, both in terms of sworn members and support staff. But you learn an awful lot about the organization historically as well as the present conditions by doing that.
And I think it makes them feel better too, to know that they're not just kind of a name and a badge number.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah.
I think that it's important whether you're Alan Mullally, who runs Ford Motor, or whether you're the chief in Bedford PD, to develop that relationship with the folks that you work with. And I like to say that I work with those women and men, that they don't work for me. We work together. We have a unique mission. We share the mission. We share the roles and duties and responsibilities, but yet they are extraordinarily talented group of folks, and it's really my pleasure and honor to be associated with Bedford PD. It's a great organization.
Oh, that's good to hear that. Yeah. I know that in a conversation that we had, when I was kind of picking your brain a little bit, which I guess I do a lot to people, and you put up with it. One of the things you had talked about was how you identify a community almost kind of like into 4 segments, which I found really interesting. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Sure.
When I looked at the community policing program at Bedford PD, I wanted to make sure that our community policing program was going to touch on everyone. And I thought about how we can do that and ensure that it's done. And so I devised a plan where I separated community policing into 4 segments. Senior citizens, children and young adults, the business and retail community, and then, of course, our neighborhoods and residents. So by looking at each one of those 4 segments as targeted segment groups within community policing, we're not going to miss anybody. We're going to touch on every resident. We're going to touch on the folks that may not live here, but they work here even. And so it's a plan that I'm confident, and the folks at the PD are confident, that we're going to be able to develop programs and have developed programs that are going to apply to each one of those. So we're not going to miss anybody. That's the first thing, is to make sure we don't leave anybody out.
Yeah, because each of the segments obviously has its own set of issues, its own set of needs.
Set of needs and issues, and one of the important things is we are weaving a theme of safety and crime prevention into each one of our programs. And so while it may not be readily apparent, there's always going to be a crime prevention, crime safety piece of fabric in whatever program we roll out, whether it's a BCTV program on a burglary in Bedford, which we hope was both informative as well as entertaining, as well as our recent bike rodeo, which was a great success with the kids.
Yeah, I didn't go down there, but I heard that it was great. You had a lot of kids there.
We had a lot of kids there. We had a lot of parents there, and it was a great day. The weather held, and I think it was great fun for everybody. But here again, teaching the kids, we have an awful lot of commuting traffic, as anybody who's been stuck on 101. Myself included.
Even some of the residential neighborhoods. I live in one that's very heavily impacted by commuter traffic.
It is, and so we have to make sure the kids, not only the youngsters, but as well as the older teenagers that are out on the road, are aware of the safety rules and tips, and make sure that they're protected.
Now, I know when we had talked too, you were kind of filling my head so fast that I was almost making notes to myself because you were covering so much ground. And you kind of talked about 5 areas of concentration that you're focused on in terms of, the overall department growth and not maintenance growth, advancement, the whole 9 yards. I don't know how you want to, do you want to talk about the areas, or do you want to talk about the segments separately, or do you want to kind of work it in that it's all like shows that great big whole montage? I want you to be able to explain it in a way that that people are going to understand a whole lot better than I could explain it to them. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
All right.
The way I look at policing is in 3 basic segments, and that is crime, highway safety, and community policing. Crime meaning obviously making sure that our residents are protected and safe. Developing programs that are community-based but are problem-solving and crime prevention oriented. Just like in drug investigation, every dollar that you spend preventing drugs from getting to the shores of the United States is much more efficient and effective than it is trying to deal with it after it gets here. Any crime is the same. So our goal has to be crime prevention, and to develop programs, data that's going to help Bedford PD be more effective in crime prevention, crime detection, as well as solvability. Highway safety, again going back to the fact that we are the neck of that funnel that funnels tens of thousands of commuters into and out of the Manchester metropolitan area every single day. And as a result, that brings a lot of issues for Bedford, not only traffic congestion, traffic accidents, as you say, even in the residential neighborhoods where they are impacted as cut-through routes where people are trying to get around that congestion, use our neighborhood streets and roads, some of which really weren't initially or originally designed to handle that kind of volume.
That's for sure.
And people are speeding a little bit perhaps because they're late and they're stuck in traffic. And so those present different issues, especially during school season when the buses are out. So we want to make sure that the roads in town are safe and develop programs that are designed to keep our highways and roads safe so that folks don't have to worry about going through the intersection and having an accident. Community policing programs, as I mentioned, making sure that there's a crime prevention theme to every one of our programs, making sure that we're interacting with the public. We're hearing from the public about what their needs are, what their concerns are. And we have that line of communication, sort of getting rid of that steel cocoon that we're in. That's why our officers on the mountain bikes are so effective. And even
I've seen them around,
even the officers on the motorcycle are more effective. And it goes back to the days when I was a uniformed patrol officer in East Hartford on a foot beat. You were required to get to know the people in your sector, in your district. And as we talked about on the phone the other day, policing has changed in many, many ways, mostly technological. But at the end of the day, it's still a police officer interacting and speaking with the public. And we can never get away from that, nor should we. And community policing is an effort to make sure that we stay connected with the community, find out what we're doing well, and find out what we're not doing so well.
And like you say, the importance of the person cannot be over-explained or over anything, because it is the key to everything. And it doesn't matter if somebody is, maybe jumping through a stop sign and needs that little educational talking to, like, you can't do that. Or, it's a kid facing a scary situation, or if it's a tragedy or whatever. The face of that cop is oftentimes kind of the connection to everything that's going on and how it's going to be handled.
It is, and Bedford PD and all the officers, all the women and men there, are so effective, I think, in dealing with the public and being a community, public service-oriented police department, so that when they interact with the public, even under conditions where perhaps it's not the best of conditions, but nevertheless they have that compassion, they have that interest, they have that concern, and it's not a heavy-handed rule of law, so to speak. It's an opportunity to meet with the public and perhaps educate them at the same time that they understand what our mission is and the reason why we do the things that we do.
Well, I know the community policing, I mean, you've been so active there, and one of the products of community policing is kind of a subject near and dear to my heart, which I know you know about, and that was the whole Are You OK program. And maybe what you don't know is the very first of this show, the Tell It Like It Is show, which was like 47 shows ago. My very first show was about Tell It Like It Is, and it was kind of like the official fundraising kickoff, if you will, telling the community about it and saying, hey, you know, it's not in the police department budget, let's raise the money for it. Yeah. And of course a few months later that wound up happening. And as I said, it was to me just a no-brainer how good it could be in terms of the police department working with a segment of the community that does need a little extra protection, kind of melding it together. And who better for one of the seniors in town to trust? I mean, especially with all the scams and all the craziness going on these days, to know that the police department is looking out for them on a daily basis. I mean, to me it was like one of the best programs that we could have in this town.
Well, I told you the other day on the phone that the Are You OK program was the cornerstone for our community policing program, and certainly is the centerpiece of our senior citizens program. So I want to publicly thank you for your support and all the support of the community out there that supported the fund drive to put Are You OK up. It's a great program. It's thriving. It's been...
Do you know what the numbers are, by any chance? How many have signed up already?
The last look I had was about seven constant members that we, receive alerts from every single day to make sure they're okay.
And of course, it started really, it was at the end of the winter, for all intents and purposes, which, probably now is the season where there's an opportunity for a lot more people as they start thinking about the cold and being isolated and power outages and so on, to be coming into it.
Exactly. You know, it's important that we continue to let the public know that the Are You OK program is still out there. It's going to continue to be a viable program for us. And we need to continue to recruit folks. So it's important to get the word out that it's still there, it's always going to be there, and that for those seniors who might think that it's the right program for them, or even their children who might think that, well, maybe the Are You OK program is good for mom or dad, or grandmom or granddad that are living in Bedford, and perhaps that gives them a peace of mind that if they don't live in town, or if they live some distance away, that they know that at least the police department is checking up on them each and every day.
Yeah, and again, what a nice start for the whole community policing.
Right.
What else? I know you have a bunch of other community projects going too.
We do have a number of community projects going. We launched a program. It's okay. Launched a program recently that you may have seen on BCTV, a burglary in Bedford.
Yes.
Which was a lot of fun to do. The officers involved really had a great time doing that, and we really appreciated the BCTV staff that came out and did it. But here again, a great way to make sure that everyone keeps an eye on Bedford, see something, say something. If there's something unusual going on in the neighborhood, let us know. The bike rodeo is another great program. We're starting up now with the new school season, our after-school programs where we're going to have officers that are going to be playing some sports with our kids again after school, as we did last semester. We're going to be doing the reading to children program. We'll have officers going back into the younger elementary schools and reading stories again that have a child protective theme to each one of those. We just had a seniors meeting just this past week with a seniors group. We inaugurated another neighborhood watch group here in the town of Bedford, and we're always looking for other additional neighborhoods for us to partner with. We're rolling out some new programs for the business and retail group, and of course we would like to meet with the business and retail community again right before the holiday shopping season to again talk about things that we can do together to keep their customers safe here in Bedford.
Now, I understand you also have some new things kind of in the horizon for business and retail.
Yes, we do. Actually, we have a workplace violence program that we're working on. We've done one presentation so far, and we're going to hopefully do some additional presentations on workplace violence. which is a concern throughout the United States.
Yes,
I'm sure
it seems like every time we turn on the news, we're hearing of some crazy situation somewhere.
It is, and you know, Bedford, New Hampshire, and New Hampshire itself is not immune to anything.
No,
so another good important program for our business retail community folks, and also we're developing some programs for our pharmacies and to address prescription drug abuse, which, according to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, is the #1 substance abuse problem in the United States today. It's the fastest growing drug abuse problem in the U.S. today is prescription drug abuse. So we'll be developing and rolling out some of those programs right around the beginning of 13.
Wow. Now, the workplace violencing, is this something that will maybe help employers or coworkers recognize maybe sooner than, you know, they might have otherwise, that maybe there is a ticking time bomb sitting next to them or what have you?
Absolutely. There are components in that presentation that gives employers and coworkers an opportunity to, you know, identify some of the traits and trends for potential issues that may exist in the workplace, and some tips about how to prevent those sort of things from escalating or getting worse. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because do you ever notice sometimes when they'll be interviewing people, like after some horror show happens somewhere, then everybody can't stop talking. Oh, well, he always was odd, or she always did do strange things, or whatever. But, like, nobody kind of said a word about it.
That's generally true, and it's true because of human nature.
Well, yeah.
Folks, you know, it's like, I used to use the analogy, it's like working or living in some place with garish, you know, bright red wallpaper. After a while, you don't even know it's there.
Oh, that's true.
You get used to it. And we get complacent, and we should never be complacent about anything that has the potential for harming others. And that's why it's distressing when, you know, we see things that occur and folks just come to accept it. And we should never be accepting of behavior or trends that are just not what we want them to be. So it's always important to keep after it and to pay attention and to remind folks that if you see things, you know, that look out of the ordinary, then, you know, call us and we'll either help you or get you the help you need.
So I would imagine then that a lot of the time you must be dealing with the HR people in some of these smaller businesses, because those are the people on the front line kind of keeping an eye on the office or the factory floor or whatever, and would sense when maybe things aren't just what they should be?
Precisely. It is the HR folks that we typically deal with, particularly with companies that don't have security divisions that provide that law enforcement nexus. So it is the HR folks that we hope are listening to your show and think about giving us a call and connecting with us to bring these kind of programs to their community, which we think are so helpful. Again, it's a preventative nature of our work, knowing that in any of these community policing programs, if we can prevent a crime, if we can give someone a safety tip, if we can provide some information to help folks keep themselves safe, protect their property, and protect themselves, then it pays such a much greater dividend than it is either detecting it while it's happening or trying to solve it after it occurs. So we really are front-end loading, you know, crime prevention, problem-solving type of policing techniques in Bedford PD.
And, you know, even just putting the crime part, which obviously is huge, to the side, I mean, in a practical sense, it's a self-protective thing for them to be aware of this, because, I mean, in the litigious society that we're involved in, if they're not aware of these situations and don't know how to handle them, they could wind up with a huge lawsuit against them.
Yeah, it is a litigious landscape out there, and it's always our effort to try to give folks as much information as they can to give them an opportunity to decide how best to proceed, and oftentimes that works best.
I know that one of the things that you've been extraordinarily active in, well, actually a couple of things, training and technology. And obviously those are things that the needs constantly change, and it's certainly a change doesn't reflect badly on what happened before, but with the changing times and the more programs available and the whole 9 yards, it has to be almost an ongoing thing. And I know you have done a whole bunch of stuff on both of those things in the past few months.
We have.
Yes.
two big areas that we've addressed over the past year, training being one of the most critical aspects, I feel, of what we've improved upon in Bedford PD. I went to the town council, and with the assistance of the manager last year, we got a budget enhancement to conduct some additional training based on a needs assessment that I had conducted. That needs assessment resulted in the establishment of a training committee at Bedford PD, where we brought together members from each of the divisions, patrol division, communications, as well as detective division, support staff, to identify the most critical training needs and gaps for Bedford PD, and then prioritize those needs and to begin to bridge those gaps in a logical way, knowing that there's not an unlimited amount of time or money, and so what's the most important training gaps that we need to bridge. And we looked at those critical life-saving skill sets that officers need to have to be able to respond and protect our residents and citizens, to mitigate and to prevent the loss of life and to neutralize hazardous situations. In today's society, we continue to read about horror stories, whether it's in Aurora, Colorado, or other places in the United States, where these sort of things happen. And oftentimes in communities either not much bigger than Bedford or sometimes smaller than Bedford. So our officers need to be able to have those skill sets to be able to take immediate action. We're not a big police department. We don't have a SWAT team. We don't have those resources, but yet, and we certainly have the support of the New Hampshire State Police, which has been fantastic in bringing us some excellent, fantastic training. Colonel Quinn has just been extraordinary. Chief Merrill in Manchester, and all the other surrounding chiefs are great in supporting all of their law enforcement partners. But in those critical first few minutes, it's a Bedford police officer that's going to be there, that's going to save someone's life. And you've got to make sure that they have those skills, the training, the opportunity to be sharp and ready to go, so that when, God forbid, it ever does happen, they're there and they're prepared. We've been able to accomplish a lot in the first year in that regard, and we're going to continue to move forward because we brought some training capability to our own department now. So in the coming year, we'll be able to roll out training programs using our own staff. That helps us with scheduling, gives us more flexibility, helps us save in overtime costs by being able to manipulate schedules by using our own folks. When you use outsiders, they do great work, but we're also sort of dependent upon their scheduling, and we have to, cobble our schedules together. So that's going to help us out. But training's been great. Looking forward to bringing training to our communication staff. Our telecommunicators in dispatch in Bedford PD do just great work. That's a tough job in there. They can go from being relatively routine and quiet to the phones going off, the radio going off, and everything goes crazy in a matter of seconds. And they're so fantastic at doing that. And I'd like to bring some additional training to communications as well in the coming year.
And it can be something simple. I mean, it can be, well, not simple in the sense that, oh boy, I mean simple in the sense that it's not dangerous to everybody in town. But I mean a situation like, a couple of years ago when all of a sudden all the power got knocked out, I would imagine they must have been flooded with calls, especially since people couldn't get through to like public service or whatever, but they knew that they could get through to the police department.
My personal baptism under fire was the infamous now Snowtober event.
Oh God, that was awful.
Which occurred not too long after I came here.
Yeah, you would have been just here a few weeks.
And thankfully we did have the basic infrastructure to keep Bedford PD communications up and running. In fact, we served as a backup communications facility for Hillsborough County and some of the other
communities. Oh, is that right?
Oh,
for
yeah.
the county as well? Wow.
Yeah, we were receiving their 911 calls and then dispatching those out. So we have that capacity to do that. Thankfully, we have a stable infrastructure, and we're hoping that the folks in Concord look at our grant favorably, and if they do, we'll be overhauling the communications facility to bring it up to the 21st century in terms of technology and equipment to make us even better and ready to move forward into the 21st century in terms of telecommunications for law enforcement. We don't dispatch just for the police. We also handle police, fire, and EMS there.
I know.
So, and it's busy, and they do a great job, but they also need the tools the 21st century tools to be able to be efficient and effective. So we'll be doing some training and some exercises, frankly, that we hope that will integrate the training that the sworn members are getting in terms of life-saving skill sets and integrating our telecommunicators, dispatchers, so that we work better and more seamlessly together. So we'll be looking at rolling some of those programs out in 13 as well.
Now, I know that one of the things that's always on your mind are dollar signs, because of the fact you're the boss. And you know that every time you need money, you have to go to those folks that meet over in that room on the other side of the building, and they can get a little cranky sometimes when people ask them for money. Do you see some serious needs at this stage in time that, you know, really residents need to say to our council, yeah, you know, we've got to give them more funding because we're talking some serious stuff that they should have had before, and we didn't give them the money for before?
The overhaul of communication and dispatch is, again, grant dependent, and we also have a capital improvement project. So those monies are all set aside, and if we get the matching money, not only will we be able to build out the communications facility, but we'll also be able to put up a more robust communications network. Right now, there's a number of spots in town where, frankly, we don't have good two-way mobile communication, and that's dangerous. Some
of your equipment's very old, isn't it?
It is old. It's around 20 years old.
Wow.
And so
that is old. And today's technology, particularly. Wow.
It is, and you know, the leaps in technology advancement over the last 3 to 4 years have been just enormous. So, you know, we're dealing, while we keep it upgraded to a certain extent, some of the basic equipment has been around for 20-some-odd years. So we're looking at some additional capacity with respect to radio communications. Pressing needs, you know, we're looking at our numbers and data-driven. One of the efforts that I've been engaged in over the past several months is looking at our data and our statistics and making sure that they present an accurate picture of really what the activity level is. And I like to use the analogy of a garden hose. The garden hose running into Bedford PD is on every day, and unfortunately we don't control the flow. Sometimes it gushes and sometimes it trickles. And
it's a good way to explain it.
We have to be prepared for those times that it gushes, and yet be mindful that we are not in a world where there is an unlimited amount of money. So we have to balance it carefully. And so we're looking at our data and looking at our numbers and presenting some information to the new town manager concerning what we need to be prepared for, to make sure that when a resident of Bedford picks up the phone or contacts Bedford PD, that there's a police officer there or police officers that are going to be able to respond and take care of their needs immediately and not have to wait. And making sure from an officer safety point of view that we have enough police officers out there to handle those more complex and sometimes life-threatening calls that do occur. They do occur.
And that was kind of my next question to you. I mean, I think it's been a whole long time since we've seen any staff additions, number-wise. And yet the town has grown bigger and bigger. The population has grown bigger and bigger. Practical things like the traffic has grown bigger and bigger. I mean, to me, just as a novice, I guess, or as a non-professional, I mean, it would seem to me that what worked even 5 years ago, number-wise, probably needs to change now. I mean, I would kind of think, honestly, that, you know, the council, the taxpayers need to think in terms of maybe we need to beef up the department with some more bodies.
We've looked at those numbers, and we're seeing about a 12 to 13% increase in activity, and that activity we call calls for service. That's that garden hose that we can't adjust. There's someone else someplace that's adjusting it for us, and we don't control it. And that's a pretty significant increase over the last couple of years.
That's huge.
And so we anticipate that that's going to grow. There is some economic development that's going on in town, some new projects right across the street from the police department. Down on Hawthorne, there's a complex going in there. There's some other commercial properties that are going in, and so we anticipate additional further needs. You know, right in front of the police department every single day, based on traffic count, there's about 25,000 cars.
It's insane out there.
That transit on 101.
Right, yeah, it's crazy.
And state DOT tells us that 25,000 cars in a 24-hour period is equivalent to one-half the Everett Turnpike between here and Boston.
Wow.
So that's a lot of traffic.
Yeah, it is.
And that's a lot of people. And we also take a look at the fact that, you know, we don't consider that we're policing a town of 21,000, 22,000 people. That's our residential population. During the daytime, that population doubles. And so we have to anticipate that we're dealing with the needs of a community at that size during those business hours.
And during commuting hours, it probably triples.
Yeah, it does. It certainly does. Yeah. And frankly, those are our peak times for activity during commuting hours in the morning, commuting hours in the afternoon. Those were those rash fender benders occur, and oftentimes if another event or two occurs, we are simply out of capacity and reserve. So we're anticipating those to continue, and we have to be prepared for those to make sure that those police officers, those men and women out there, are safe, and we can get to our civilians and residents to make sure that they're safe.
Well, that, you know, that's kind of one of the things that I would want to get across to people too, that it's not simply a case of the police department being able to better protect, you know, the residents of Bedford, but we need to think in terms of we need to be able to give them the means to better protect themselves. And, you know, I will admit to a great deal of partiality there. I have a son who's a cop. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the community that he works in should never stop spending money to keep their police department safe and their fire department safe, period. And I don't know that we've done a good job of that here in Bedford. Because I think if you have an understaffed department, you're putting a lot of extra stress on everybody from top to bottom. And someday it's going to catch up.
We are mindful of that. There are days when our command staff is out answering calls, manning traffic posts. We had lieutenants, the detective lieutenant.
And that's crazy.
Was on.
That's not where they should be, obviously.
Was on a traffic post at the fire on Perry Road for a time. I answer calls when I'm out there, when there's no other officers available. And so we're mindful of that, and at times it's very thin. And so
that creates an unsafe situation. Seriously. And I'm not talking about an unsafe situation for me. I'm talking about an unsafe situation for all those men and women out there with the uniforms on. Plain and simple. That's what I'm talking about.
We're very concerned about that. You have a son that's a police officer. As a mom, you know, and my children are not in law enforcement, but I can't imagine being the father or the mother of a law enforcement officer and how they feel each and every day when they know that they're out there on shift, and just hoping that everything goes well that day. We rely on each other. Those men and women out there are highly trained. They're getting more training, they're getting more equipment, more technology that you mentioned earlier to help them do their job, to help them keep them safe. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that there are assistants, their brother or sister officer there ready to help them out.
Exactly, because we could build a beautiful new station, and we could give everybody the most new equipment that was available. But if we don't have enough people, what good is it?
It goes back to
it all goes back to the people.
It all goes back to people. At the end of the day, policing is all about people, and it really does get back to that. And there's just no getting around it. We're a growing community. It's a vibrant community. A AAA bond rating is not something to be considered lightly. It's an extraordinary achievement. The only town in the state of New Hampshire that has that. And they consider things like police, fire, EMS, infrastructure.
Of course.
And so for the residents to have that great school system, to have that great bond rating, to be able to feel safe at night, to make sure that there's a firefighter, a police officer, a paramedic ready and able to be there. If that's the quality of service that the residents of Bedford want and expect, that's what we need to deliver.
And you know, I sometimes, and people who know me well hear me say it, especially when I'm off on a tangent, you know, complaining about things, which is only like once or twice a year. But a lot of people, you know, and I don't mean this to be insulting, but because it is a nice town, and a lot of people aspire to move to Bedford, and, you know, because it is a nice town, and nice residential areas, and good schools, and all that good stuff, a lot of people seem to kind of see us in this little Bedford bubble. You know, this like wonderful little idyllic little town that doesn't have problems because it's just so very perfect here. I mean, sometimes I feel as though, remember that movie, The Stepford Wives? I mean, there's almost that Stepford Wives mentality going on, you know? I know, I get off on tangents. But, I mean, if you just think back in the past year and a half, we have had some situations here in town, very tragic situations, that I don't think were as much of a danger to any residents as it was definitely a danger to the members of our police department. You know, a situation that was right up on Boynton Street, and then that was not long after you came on the job. We had another situation where a longtime resident, there was a thing going on that he kind of went off the reservation and nobody knew where he was, and he presumably was armed, and they had to shut down a whole neighborhood and such to protect people. So it's not like we're kind of in this little utopia, and it only takes one situation like that. That's all, just one. I mean, we all said that just a few months ago in a town just down the road from us. One situation and the tragic consequences of it.
I'm dating myself, but when I get back and say that, you know, Father Knows Best, that old TV show from the 50s, just doesn't exist.
I remember that. I whispered it.
And we don't live in a bubble. We're not immune. There's not a wall around Bedford. It's a great community. It's populated by fantastic people, great volunteers. I'd like to later on in the show talk about CERT and the volunteers there. It's a wonderful community. Are we immune to problems and issues? Absolutely, we are not. The things that plague people all across the United States is no different here. We may have proportionately a little bit less of it, but you're right, it only takes that one incident. It only takes that one event. And we need to be prepared for that.
That's right.
Our officers need to be prepared for that. And so that's what we plan for, and that's what we train for each and every day. And we sort of take it for granted that it's never going to happen, but you just don't know. You know.
Hey, this isn't Maybury, and it's not Andy and Bonnie, you know, to the rescue all the time, plain and simple.
You know, we did have an officer that shot someone a few years ago, several years ago here in town, and so those sort of things do occur. Tragic as they are, as difficult as it is to accept, and sometimes it doesn't involve a resident. Again, we are that neck of that funnel of people that are transiting through the area because of our road system. So we have to just be prepared and for any eventuality.
Well, you know, when the time comes, whenever it may be on whatever issue it is, when it comes time to lobby both the residents and our town council for something for the police or fire department, come on this show, we'll raise a little hell.
Great, great.
Well, you know, believe it or not, look how fast the time went. We're down to like 2.5 minutes.
Wow.
So, yeah, I know, it goes by fast, but I can have you back on again.
That'd be great.
I'll have you back anytime you want. But, you know, to close this particular show, what would be the thing you'd like to get across most to the folks who watch this one?
I think it's important to remember that if you see something, say something. If you see something suspicious, oftentimes there's so many cases involved where folks are interviewed later on and they say, well, you know, I happened to see a suspicious car. There was somebody suspicious in the neighborhood, but you know, I just didn't want to call and bother you. Please, that's what we live for. We live to be bothered. We want to hear from our residents. When they hear, see anything that's out of the unusual, please give us a call. We'd ask folks to sign up for Nixle, www.nixle.com. It's a way for us to get information out to residents on their smartphone or their computer or even their text message authorized regular phone. So that's important. It gives them great community traffic information and things of that nature. That's so important. I also want to say that, again, I touched on it earlier on, the men and women of the Bedford Police Department are the best anywhere. Every police department in New Hampshire is got great people, but I'm so proud of those folks and so proud of what they're doing and each and every day to protect the residents of Bedford. It's just wonderful. And the support that I've gotten from everyone here and the support that the community gives Bedford PD. We just stood up the new civilian emergency response team. They've been activated twice, once on the Perry Road fire and on a propane.
Oh, they were out there too?
They were out there. And you know, when we have those folks out there, those are volunteers. We can take that police officer off that traffic post and put her or him back out on the road answering calls, protecting our citizens. And again, hats off to all those volunteers. We have our second class of CERT folks in now, the 20-hour class.
I saw that in the paper.
That's great.
Did it start?
It started a couple weeks ago. They had their second class this week, and so we'll soon have about 40 or so volunteers ready and equipped, ready to go to help Bedford PD and the fire department to make sure that our professional employees, our firefighters, paramedics, and police officers can get back out there and answer those calls. So hats off to those volunteers.
Fantastic. Well, we have hit the 0 mark, believe it or not. I'm so glad you came on.
Well, thanks so much
and
for
I
having
think
me.
there's so many more topics that we could talk about, so let's plan to do another one.
You bet.
That work?
You bet.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, I think this was a great show. You certainly had a chance to get to know Chief Bryfonski a little more and a little more personally, and I think you'll agree with me that he's got us in his mind and he's doing a good job, and the department is doing a fabulous job. He told it like it is. That's what this show is all about. We need you to tell it like it is too, especially if they need help with the council or with anybody else. Okay, so till next time, you tell it like it is. Bye-bye.